Okay. Um, I'm missing somebody.
Yoni.
Yeah.
He said not to wait for him.
What?
He said not to wait for him.
You said not to wait for him?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We are in the middle of the page, on page Zion. Let me just hit this first. On page Zion, uh, just about the middle of the page, a couple lines above that, the line starts with the words of Mamshichim Oir HaNefesh. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions on the previous shir, shiuri, shir? No.
If I didn't write it down, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay. Next comes a parenthetical insert, followed by another parenthetical insert. I want to, for the time being, skip the first parentheses.
No, no, no. We did have a question. We did have a question. The question was the highest in the bottom. We talked about the practical. You said there's like a functional highest, which allows like the ear to hear, and then there's the highest which just allows it to be. It gives it the vitality to exist,
Mhm.
which is why you can have an organ that God forbid exists, but it doesn't work properly. He said that if you have an organ that doesn't work properly and you fix it, then you can bring down this functional highest back into it. So I think the question was, isn't it the same way with the other highest? If there's God forbid a problem with an organ, so then it can not be getting this general vitality, but if you fix it, then it'll also elicit this general vitality.
Well, true. I mean, the fact is that if Chas v'sholom an Aver loses its general vitality, like the basic highest, then it's not, generally speaking, not recuperable. But because the Aver no longer lives. You know, as long as one is alive, you can cure him. He is amazing is already a different story. But we are essentially, the Rebbe is bringing a proof, so to speak, that we should be able to actually um, uh, kind of relate to the concept that the neshama comes to the guf automatically. And so, if the Indian that the neshama, that the guf is alive, the guf is alive simply says that there is a presence of the neshama there, but that the neshama acts through the guf. That's already a secondary thing. Why would the neshama want to act through the guf? The neshama is infinitely higher than the guf and wants to be in its own realm. What it means is the following. Um, the first, the primary koyach hanefesh is the seichel, is the meichim. Um, the meichim, the seichel hanefesh, as it is manifest in the goof, is an entirely different category than the way the nefesh understands things on its own. Totally. The nefesh understands things on its own purely and totally spiritually. In other words, it can approach the truth on a pure level without having to to find place for them in a worldly sense, in which it can relate to truth as such, whereas in the goof, it has to already formulate it so that that this truth can be somehow um, contained in a worldly environment. Even on the highest level in the moyach, there has to be some type of a worldly orientation. So this is where the question is. Let it be that the goof is now healthy and is ready to receive the neshama, but why would the neshama want to function to the goof? Why wouldn't the neshama rather be in its own environment, in its own realm? It understands things at a much higher level there. And yet, the neshama automatically wants to engage the goof and understand things at the level of the goof. Not to understand things on its own, independent and much higher level. The goof is a hindrance to the neshama to understand and to relate to things and in its pure level. The fact that the neshama is still drawn to the goof and once the goof is a keli and the neshama goes down into the goof and makes sure that that it functions through the goof, shows that there is something in the goof that's attractive to the neshama, even though it's illogical.
It's not a question that Rashab didn't explain it so clearly. But you mentioned last time that there's two kinds of vitalities. And even what you're saying now, the mere fact that the neshama is let go, that it's giving a highest general to the good, the goof is alive. So how can you let this go? Because this also has to be willingly. Because neshama cannot give vitality even as far as I understand.
No, well, that which the neshama gives vitality to the goof in general,
Right.
you can argue that that does not in any way interfere with the neshama, doesn't hinder the neshama.
Oh, it doesn't?
How does it? The neshama is there, so the goof is alive. But when the neshama, when it functions in these individual functioning levels, then this is actually like a hindrance to the neshama to act at in its full force.
Okay, so it's just to prove the point over here.
That's the point, to prove the point that the neshama is somehow attracted to the goof.
But if I would ask a question, just for the sake of it anyway, is it true that for neshama to be here in general, even without its functional usage, it also has to be willingly.
Yes, everything is willingly.
And also for the sake of the body.
What do you mean?
I mean, general highs the neshama gives to the body, which is to make it alive, not functioning, but just alive.
Right.
It's also because body draws down.
Right, but there we don't see it in the same way as we see it on the functioning level. There, this general chayas, I mean, this is, we're going to come to it. This is broad and has many paradoxes, but just like the sun shining in the world. It doesn't in any way affect the sun, the fact that it shines there. It doesn't grasp, doesn't take it, doesn't hinder it. So in a certain sense, this is also b'derech memela with the neshama. And it doesn't hinder it. You could say it doesn't hinder the neshama, even though it's berotzen, as we're going to see. But the inyan that it goes through and it functions on the koiches level, on the functioning level, there clearly the neshama is not functioning at its level.
The question that we had was to that point. Since it's, whatever, I understand it's not to prove the point, but since anyway it's willingly, and it's for the sake of the body, then why, when the organs, was broken apart and wasn't functioning at all, and that's what it was fixed, who knows how,
Right.
Fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Why the neshama should not enliven it automatically? Why it should be, like, God forbid, amputated or whatever?
Or because the organ the organ lost its capacity to receive chayas, not because of the neshama.
How did it lose it? After all it's being restored. We're talking about when it's restored, right? When it's already a caliph, or it's never can become a caliph anymore. It's a problem with the body. And if you would somehow restore the bodily function of it, then it would enliven.
Yeah, but the organ is no longer a caliph. Right. All right, so as we said, this next parenthesis, at least for the time being, we are going to skip over. We're going to go down to about 10 lines from the bottom, 9 lines from the bottom, and the line begins with the be'oirach, and that's the end of that parenthesis. And we're going to go straight into the next one. Okay? Okay. So we finished saying that this inyan, that the neshama actually comes down into the guf, is hepech tivoi, is contrary to its nature, and effectively it's against its will, it's against its rotzing, and it's like a mukhrach. We're saying that it's like forced into it. V'hagam d'chol hashpot tzorich li is berotzin davke. Although that hashpah has to be berotzin, willingly and intently. Berotzin does not mean only willingly, but intently, that the neshama wants to be mashpia. It's not something that happens automatically. Certainly not without its will. Ukiyodua, as is known, the ikeri didas hashefa hu machmas hasimcha davka. That in fact, the bestowing of shefa, bestowing of a gift and hashpah and effect is machmas hasimcha, is because of simcha, out of joy, and there has to be a willingness to give it. Ve'eich yiyeh. So therefore, how can it be? Yidi das v'hamshoch hasoir hanefesh. Lach is haguf. How can it be that the neshama coming down to give life to the guf should be behechrech hanefesh? That actually it is behechrech hanefesh. It is contrary to its will, and it's being forced to it, as we have just now finished saying.
Didn't we already say that hak doesn't mean?
Okay, that's what I was explaining to you.
Ah.
I shouldn't. Otherwise, the neshama is not involved. Ho'inyan, the inyan is like this: the be'emes zehu benefesh berotz. In ultimate truth, it is absolutely berotz in the nefesh. Shechofetz v'roitze, it desires and it's certainly willing, leired ulahachis es aguf, to descend and enliven the guf. And why does it want to come down and be machum chay the guf? Mitzad shehanefesh margish as ha'oir hanale, because that the nefesh is senses the superior light shel shoyre shumokir haguf, of the source of what the guf represents. Harei hu roitze leireid, and thus the neshama, the nefesh, wants to descend ol hachis as haguf, and to enliven the guf. So therefore it is absolutely berotz. And the nefesh really actually does want it. But what does it mean that it's elosh and nikra behechrech? Why then is it called behechrech, that it's being forced into it? K'moi bal korchoch ato chai. As we say, the Mishnah says, bal korchoch ato chai, that you live bal korchoch, not by your choice, not by your will, but bal korchoch. What is it in bal korchoch? A person doesn't want to live. The pshat is like this. Mipnei shehorotzein hazeh. The reason it's called bar kochai is that this rotzein to come down and be mechai the guf bo loy mitzad haguf. The nefesh gets this rotzein from the guf. Loy mitzad atzmoi betivoy yesh loy rotzein leirit. Not that on its own, in its own nature, it has this rotzein to descend. And this is the big difference. Just as we say, the Gemara says that you shouldn't stray after your heart and after your eyes. What do the eyes have to do with the heart? Because when there's one desire, when the eye detects, and then the heart gets drawn. If the eye doesn't see anything, then there's no drawing on the heart. As a matter of fact, this is why the halacha is that summa choshev kemeis, that if someone who is a summa rachmon, who does not have sight, he is kemeis, he doesn't have a yetzer hora. Because the yetzer hora does not have really an enticement on its own. But if he sees something, the sight is what draws him. In this Inyan, the similar Inyan in the Tzad HaToiv, there is the Neshama. The nefesh on its own does not construe anything, does not, so to speak, imagine a goof that it should want to go down and be mechayev. The nefesh is on its own is aware only of that which is above it and wants to go up. But when it is exposed to the goof, then it recognizes the mile of the goof and it wants to come down. That means the goof is what arouses, tells the nefesh about its mile and makes the nefesh want to come down. This is why it's called behechrach, because it does not create this rotzen on its own. The betivoy, because in its own nature, retzoinoi lalois lemailo dafke. Its rotzoin, its will is to go upwards exclusively, dafke. As we said before, that ruach ha'odom is oilo lemailo. This is the ruach ha'odom. That its inyan is, if he seeks anything, he's seeking for it lamaila, above, not below. Rak, except because that the nefesh senses the source of the guf, which is actually manifest in the guf. This is why he's willing to come down lamato lahachis es aguf, to mimechaya the guf, and therefore it is both. It's bal korche and it is also barotz. Bal korche means that it's enticed externally by the guf, but once it's enticed, it really wants it.
Can you explain what it means to act according to what the sharash of something is? I mean, it's very much sharash, but the body is in actuality, it's lowly.
Yeah, I think we did that. I think we did it, if not more than once. Yes, yeah, certainly. I'm sorry. I think I touched on this.
Yeah,
You didn't find any
no, I
notes?
thought I would write it down, but I didn't find.
Okay. So I'm glad that you stopped me on this. Um, Shoresh Umokoir is an extremely important aspect in the Mitzias. And even though it's called the Shoresh Umokoir, the source, in some way the source is manifest in the Mitzias of it itself. If we take a simple illustration of the concept of a Shoresh Umokir, right? Shoresh Umokir in our terminology would be the reason why we do something. Like we always illustrate, a person goes to work, and during the process, the whole time that he's taking the train, he's traveling, you would think he's enjoying riding in the subway. That's why he's riding. He's going. Where are you going? I'm riding in the subway. That makes sense. He says no. He's going to work. Oh, you enjoy to work? No, I need the compensation that comes from the work. Oh, you like money? No, I have to support my family. And of course, this goes deeper and deeper. In actual fact, what you see is certain activities that if you would not know the broader picture, not only if you would not know the broader picture, if you didn't have the understanding of what's happening just by observation, you would absolutely miss the whole point. Not see what's happening at all. Because when one goes and buys groceries, he thinks that he enjoys trading money for objects. They don't see what is actually happening. Because the real thing that is happening is an entirely a human thing which is not really definable in his actions. It's a much broader and deeper union that's not even capturable in a physical sense. And that's the real thing that's happening. So, in this physical activity that he does, so even though what you observe is a physical activity, but what really gives it chayas is something infinitely greater than the physical activity. What makes it happen? Take away that ingredient and the whole thing collapses. We could see it in a business venture. You build up a factory, and they could have very sophisticated machinery, sophisticated computers, and you write all kinds of programs, and everybody is very proud of their achievement of how their program works, how the computer works, everything works. Bottom line, they found out that no one in the market wants to buy their computer for some reason. It may be the smartest and the best thing under the sun, but nobody wants to buy it. What happens? The door closes, and the whole thing dissipates, as if it never happened. Which means that the real reason, the enticement, that the highest of it is that which holds it up. Take that away, the whole thing collapses. So that when you say that there's a shoresh umokir haguf, shoresh umokir haguf, yes, the shoresh umokir haguf is really concealed in the guf. But this is the highest. This is essentially what the guf represents. Without as much as much as noticing it, because it conceals it. But in fact, this is what it represents.
The show is very smart though.
The Shoni is, yes, it's very smart to shoyrish umokir. To explain to you the concept, they say the Shoni is very smart. we speak in davening. We say that there is hisbonenus in davening. And one of the inyonim that we speak about hisbonenus in davening is how great, morabu ma'asecho Hashem, how great, how multiple, how plenty are your creations and how great are your creations. And we actually go and we actually enumerate the major aspects of creation. You know, the plants and the mountains and the animals and the human beings and the sun and the moon. We describe the whole operation, you know, in very brief but very powerful terms. And you're misboinen it. In being misboinen, in the greatness of the world, there could be two opposite reactions. Because you have people who study geology, and they are mispoiled. I don't know about the mispoiled, but this is, look how deep this is and how big this is and how powerful the water flow is and whatever it is. Ultimately spoiled from the world. And they claim that somehow by looking at the depth of the Grand Canyon, you kind of acquire a certain humility. You become both like, I don't know if that's if that's a fact. You come back and say, you know what I saw? I saw the Grand Canyon. I don't see it. It gives you any kind of humility. But that's what they, you mispoil, you worship the greatness, the power of the physical world, which is the exact opposite of what is meant in Hisbonenus and Tefillah. In Hisbonenus and Tefillah is that you should be mispoiled from the Koyach Haliki. The Koyach Haliki, both the Koyach Haliki and the Rotzin Haliki, the Abba, the closeness, and the Rebbe shows in providing for all the creatures and all, and the whole ecosystem. How is it that, what happens, in what respect, and under what circumstances will the Hisbonenus bring you to one conclusion and will give you a sense of closeness to the Meibesh and his spoilers from the Lakus? And when will it have a totally opposite effect?
I don't call it opposite. Maybe you just don't know how to follow it.
Because the opposite, because here you're speaking about the greatness of Alakus, and then you're speaking about the greatness of the world.
Right, but still, even when you talk about greatness of Holocaust, it brings you to the realization how about greatness of Holocaust is the greatness of a creation.
Right, but I'm saying the very same observation
Right, of course. Yeah,
can bring you to two different conclusions,
Right.
two different effects.
Right.
What is the difference? Once one has the sense of emunah, which means that it is clear and totally permeates his mind that all existence is from Elokus. So when he observes Elokus, he sees that as a godly emanation. And therefore, the more he sees it, the more he is mispoiled from the Elokus.
When he observes nature.
When he observes nature. When if he does not have the awareness of Elokus, then the more he observes nature, the more swallowed up in nature he becomes. The nefesh knows nothing but alakus. So when it sees a goof, he's saying it's smart. When he sees a goof, he says, wow, what a koyach aliki is in this. Cannot see anything else. Some years back, many years back, I had in the house for Shabbos a student from the university. Ultimately, he became frum Talzah. So this student, he was a student, he's studying biology. And this is going back in the 60s. And in those days, biology was kind of a dangerous science because the tendency then was to kind of substantiate, oh, it's all a physical, to deny the presence of a neshama. And that the whole thing, biology, there is a biological factor that actually brings life. It was a very dangerous science. And this student, he says that he came to believe in God, in Hashem, from biology. He had a pure view, a healthy view. And when he saw all the miracles that happened in the biological system, he said that it couldn't be but a godly hand in it. He actually came to Lakus from the study of biology. It's not the opposite of what the tendency was in those days. So this is the similar in what we said before. Ruach ha'odam oila l'mayla, ruach ha'bheima yiredes l'mata. And we said, when you're confronted with the problem, what is the ruach ha'bheima? Where is the bheima drawing you to? And where is the odam drawing you to? The reaction of a human being is, let's go up. The reaction of bheima is, let's go down. So there's no miracle in the fact that the nefesh, when it sees the groove, it sees the shoyrish umoke with the groove.
And to take it back to the mashal, the person gets in the train because he sees the end, the end game, which is like a very lofty idea of your children growing up and giving you nachas, and it's like he's getting either subconsciously or
This is what's carrying him throughout.
It's carrying through the whole thing. That's why he gets in the train and he goes to work, and that's what's carrying through the whole. Why then do some people they think that they're working just? Some people say like, why do you work to make money, or like they think like that is they're not able to see they don't see the charge.
Well, this is exactly what we're saying, that there is ruach ha'odam eila l'mayla ruach ha'bheima yiredes l'mata. What is a human enticement for life? Ruach ha'odam is eila l'mayla. That the enticement is because there is something real and great for which he's living. Ruach ha'bheima is yiredes l'mata. For COVID, for pleasure. And as long as he can satisfy himself and get himself some place in the world, he doesn't care about anything else. Yiredes l'mata. All right. Let's continue on the bottom line. Thus we will also be able to understand how is it that Bal Korcha Atomeis, that when the Neshama has to be separated from the groove, it becomes Bal Korcha. it seems to be contradicting what we said about Kol Chai. Sheine roitze loitzes min haguf, v'la'alus l'mayla. All of a sudden, the nefesh does not want to leave the body and to rise, go upwards. Im heyois shezehu ritzoinehu atzmi b'tivoy. Although that in fact this is its essential rotzon, by its nature to want to go upwards, and here all of a sudden he doesn't want to go. And that is mipnei sheroitze behagilu yoir shemitzad haguf, because the nefesh actually wants the gilu yoir that it gets from the mitzad haguf. Shehu gilu yoir naila beyoser, which is a type of a gilu yoir that is infinitely superior, and the nefesh on its own could never get to that. Ubifrat, and moreover, shepoal ve'oso birur aguf ha'nefesh habamis. If the nefesh, during its sojourn in the guf, it actually accomplished the purification of the guf and the nefesh habamis. Shemeir boi oir shoyresh haguf begilu yoser. So then, the brightness of the shoyresh haguf shines through even more, and then the nefesh truly doesn't want to leave the guf, because it actually senses the greatness of the shoyresh of the yoyer.
Should it be the same also by the Shokor Hakimes? This concept should be, because this is a pnimius, that over there the neshama was he just had to go through the process, which is problematic, which is painful for it. But it was looking towards its goal, which is it says or the mile, it wants to improve.
Right.
It was to go out of itself, so move up, and in this case going down was going up from neshama, right? So you hear what I'm saying? But it makes, even though it's, so to say, get rid of the technical problems, which is, it now goes back to its normal place, but it's now gonna lock its what it was intended to. You hear what I'm saying?
I know what your point is.
My point is, I'm saying that in the first place, when the Shema come down, right? It was brought down because it wanted to go higher, to go out of itself, to go higher to the new level, which was impossible to achieve by itself. It has to go, which is it has to go down to the goof, right? To be able to achieve certain things which it never would be able to achieve. And on that way, it would have endured the pain to be in the goof and all these problems we discussed previously, right? Which is that Balkov over there. So and here also is Balkov. What Balkov? Even though it goes out of its old problems and there is no more limitations of the goof and this and that, but the reason for the real idea for which it came here, which it really bothered it even more, I guess, because in the first place it gave up all the comfort up there, so to say, to come. So now it has to do the opposite of it. So it should be more painful. The Mesa, Balkon should be more painful than Balkon.
Because it's giving up even a greater thing. What you mean?
Of course. It's giving up, it's real, what it came for to begin with. Now
Right. Okay. Nimtzo. Unless you know it by heart. Okay. 4 lines from the top. Nimtzo. And thus we have concluded the sibas hamshochas v'yiridas oir v'chayis hanefesh, that the cause for the fact that the oir and the chayis hanefesh is drawn down and descends and comes down, lahachis as haguf, to give life to the guf, is actually hu mitzad haguf. It is actually because of the guf. The guf is what has that effect. The Evrei Haguf, where the Evorim of the Guf themselves, Mamshichim as Chayas HaNefesh, they draw the Chayus of the Nefesh, Lehislabesh Betoichoi Lahacha yoisei. That the nefesh should be willing, that the chayes nefesh should be willing to come down and be imbued in these evorim and to give them life and to translate the chayes nefesh at the guf level. V'lochein, thus, alidei haguf, through and as a result of the guf, mitoy saf oir v'chayis behanefesh. Actually, the nefesh gains a great thing. It gains oir v'chayis, even though the nefesh actually gives chayis to the guf. But then, as a result of giving chayis to the guf, the nefesh itself benefits and it gets additional oir v'chayis. What is additional oir v'chayis that the nefesh gets? The nefesh is the one that gives chayis to the guf. So what can possibly be added to the nefesh? The alidei he slaps shos hanshoma beguf davke. That only as a result of the neshama coming down and getting involved with the guf, alidei ze davko, only through this, bo haneshama, the neshama itself can come up to libchin as ideas elokus bemuchash mamhosh. That the neshama comes to know elokus in a different way completely. And what type of way? The idea of elokus, the type of idea of elokus, that's called bemuchash mamash. Muchash mamash means in actual sensing it. It's like a sense. Not only a piseichel, not only because it knows it inherently, but because it actually senses it. Bemuchash mamash, like as if you would actually feel, taste, touching it. Shelo yozeh be'anshama koidem. That which this was not present in the neshama koidim islapshusa beguf. Before that it came, it was established in the guf. What was the difference between before the neshama coming down in the guf and after? Before the neshama came down in the guf, shehoiso maseges elokus. Then too the neshama had a hasoga in elokus. Avol, however, hakel hoyo bebchinas idiyas hametzius levat. Its knowledge of elokus and its hasoga and its comprehension of elokus was all at the level what's called idiyas hametzius, knowing of the existence of elokus. Avol alidei islapshusa beguf, but then by the neshama being imbued in the guf, alidei zebo, as a result of that, it comes libchinas idiyas elokus bemuchash, to the union of knowing elokus in actual sense, shezehu ke'ein ri'iyo belokus, which is sort of like an union of seeing elokus. Ki yodua o mevua b'mokim achir. As is known and is explained elsewhere. So I want to delve into this slightly. And to kind of get into the understanding what actually takes place and what is the additional oil that the neshama gets by knowing Elokus and through the goof. That's bemuchas mamush. Actually, we had several sessions, if you would recall, and you could actually go back to the archives where we discussed the power of Riyah, of sight. There are two distinct levels of knowing something. One is called Hidiyas HaMetzius, Hasogas HaMetzius, and one is called Riyas HaMahus, and this is called Bemuchash Mamush. The principle of this of these differences is as follows. If you see something flying, you see a rock flying, you know that something threw it. Right? Something threw it. Somebody threw it. How do you know that somebody threw it? You don't see the thrower. You don't see the koyach that carries the rock. You see the rock flying. Because you see the rock flying, you know it couldn't fly on its own. Therefore, you know that something must have caused it to fly. But you don't have a direct knowledge of a direct connection to that which made it fly. You know that there is a cause, there is an external cause, and that's all it is, Hamitzius. You know it's there, but you do not have any direct connection to it, even though you have such irrefutable proof that it's there, because you see the rock flying. But you only see the rock, you only see the result of it. You don't see it directly. So you don't have a direct connect to the force that made it fly. This knowledge, Idiyas HaMetzius, is a knowledge that no matter how many times it has been proven to you, and you have come to the same conclusion, it is always something that you know because of some proof. It isn't something that you can directly relate to. You don't have a direct relationship to it. You just know, you know it indirectly at a distance. When you see an object, even though that physically speaking, the reason you see an object is because the object is in your way of vision. Like one can argue that there's a physical factor in this. The object is in your way of vision. In other words, because this object blocks my side of the table, so I know that there is something between me and the table. But that's not that's not the extent of your knowledge of the subject. Your knowledge of the subject is direct, not because it blocks your line of vision. So in the Re'iyah, your knowledge is not because of any kind of substantiation, what's called, any kind of proof, any kind of reason. You know the object directly. This is called Re'iyah. In other words, this becomes a reality. This is real to you. It is real to you not because of any kind of proof. You don't need proof for it. Even though that in fact you know it, as I said, through some kind of a physical situation. But that's what Re'iyah has. Even a physical level Re'iyah is such that gives you direct connect to the object. Okay. And this is essentially the difference on the nefesh, the ideas of a lakus that the nefesh has on its own, and the idea of the lakus that the nefesh has through its slapshus in the guf.
I didn't get an explanation.
What?
I didn't get an explanation.
One second. Okay. This is what the Rebbe says. What the nefesh knows by on its own, what the nefesh knows through its slapshus in the guf. It says that the nefesh in his slapshus in the guf knows the inyan of alakus b'muchosh. B'muchosh. Prior to that, prior to his slapshus in the guf, it knows what's called the mitzias of alakus. Okay. As we said before, the nefesh only knows alakus. Like you asked me about the nefesh being so smart. The nefesh only knows alakus. That's the only thing that's true to the nefesh. This inyan that the nefesh knows only of alakus, why does the nefesh know only alakus? Because it itself is eliki. The only thing that's real to the nefesh is that which conforms with what it itself is. It itself is eliki. And therefore it knows alakus because it itself conforms or confirms that presence. Because it itself is eliki. When the nefesh, I'm going to piecemeal, okay? Like I'm a little bit jumping the gun, but I'm in contrast to what we said. Here the nefesh knows alakus because it itself is alakus. When it comes in contact with the guf, and the guf is far from Gilui Lakus, is mamash adover gashmi. So the guf is mamash adover gashmi. It's not eliki, and yet even though it is not eliki, it still comes from elikus. Then the neshama comes to grips with the etzem onyan elikus. So let's try to examine this a little bit further. You will recall some time back we discussed that in Seichel, understanding, there are three levels we discussed. I just want to touch on two levels. There is the level in Seichel where something makes sense to me. This is the way I think. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone else will agree with me. Has no reason to agree with me. This is the way I think. Then he goes a little deeper into the Seichel, or maybe much deeper into the Seichel. And he gets to recognize that this is not just his preference, this is the way he thinks. But actually this is a real truth. Such a truth that he can even explain to someone else, and I'm sure he's going to be able to recognize it and also agree with me. When he gets to that level of the Seichel, then it's a totally different, it's called Einog HaSeichel, if you remember. This is a totally different level of understanding. What level of understanding is this? This is a level of understanding that tells him the following. The fact that I understand it because is not a proof of anything. I understand it because that's my preference. This is my inclination. But the fact that I can explain it to someone else, what does that tell me? That this is not just true because I understand, but because it is true in and of itself. It's what we call an absolute truth. I can even show it to someone else. This is when I can see the Seichel B'Muchosh. Now, but this is a reality not based on my understanding, on my preference, on who I am, but based on what the truth is. The nefesh comes to recognizing a lakus. The nefesh itself comes to recognizing a lakus as a result of its connection to the guf in a much greater and brighter level than it had before. Before it knew a lakus because it knows a lakus. Now it knows a lakus because that's mamash the thing that it senses it in fact. This is it. Not because it's my preference, because this is something that confirms with me, but something that is real. So the Gilui Elokus, an oir Eliki that the Nefesh has, and through the Guf, is Shaloi B'Erech to that which the Nefesh has, even the Nefesh itself. Even though the Nefesh really relates to Elokus, it's all it is Elokus. But just because all it is Elokus, it never gets to the essence of Elokus. Because it always remains that I understand Elokus because that's my preference. This it makes sense to me. When it comes into the guf, this is when it really experiences the presence of Elokus. You have something on your tip of your tongue, Ruben.
I'm trying to think of an example for something that makes sense to you, but not a general sense.
Every seichel, at first, if it goes through the process of seichel, first it makes sense to you. And then when you formulate it and you find its place in the world, and you see how it actually explains things in the world, that's when it becomes universally acceptable. You could even say, perhaps in common terminology, the difference between theory and a proven theory. Theory could be, this is the way I like to look at it. This is the way I like to analyze the situation. Doesn't necessarily hold true. And doesn't necessarily mean that I can explain it to someone else that he would also look at it the same way.
To get an insight.
What?
To get some kind of insight. Right? Insight means that you think that, well, you get it from above. Insight is something
Yeah.
that is that wouldn't be an example of something, because insight means that it's true not only to you, it's true.
Well, as long as this is an insight that you carry it as an insight, and you're not able to actually transmit it, you don't really have a grasp on it yet. It is true, but you haven't gotten to its truth yet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It is true, but you haven't really touched on its real truth until you can actually embody it and then present it and say, okay, this is the way it is. That's what we learned the whole time, that when you put the seichel in dibur, that's when you have even greater light. This whole Maimon is in that direction.
What exactly is it about the group that makes the neshama see godliness as not being like a preference?
Do it again. What?
What is it exactly about the group which makes the neshama realize that it makes it not only no longer like the neshama's preference, it becomes like, where is that in the body where it's that godliness can make such a thing?
Yes, I have to interrupt now, but you will start me from your question, Rich, next time. Okay? I don't want to shortchange this question. You know what I'm saying? Okay.